Hey there, I'm Ari from the Tech Buyers Guru, and I've got another PC case review for you here on the channel today. This time around, I'm checking out the brand new Corsair iCUE 5000X RGB ATX case launching today, January 14th, 2021. It's the first new product release from Corsair in the new year, and it's also the only Corsair release that coincides with the CES timeframe. So if you're looking for a virtual showcase from Corsair for CES 2021, well, this is it. Now I'm going to get a few things out of the way first before I jump into features and benchmarks. First of all, the price. This was supposed to launch in the US at $190. A lot of other reviewers will probably quote that price, but I was just told in the past 48 hours from Corsair that this is actually going to be $205. And the reason I caught that was because I noticed a price jump on a lot of other cases on their website and online. And I asked them about it, and they said, yeah, we've actually had to increase a lot of our cases by $15 due to unforeseen circumstances, due to trade and supply chains and all the rest. I anticipate this is going to affect a lot of other manufacturers as well. But in the US, this is a $205 case. It's not $190. And you will see that a lot of the other Corsair cases that I featured on the channel have jumped in price $15 as well. Now, in terms of the name, you may look at this and say, well, that's an Obsidian case, right? Well, good for you for identifying that look. But Obsidian, graphite, and carbide, and all the other names that Corsair has used to identify its cases are all in the past. They're no longer going to use that. They have a new naming scheme, and it's a little bit complicated. First, you have a number. So 5,000 refers to the size. There's also a 4,000X and D, and I actually showcased the 4,000D airflow on the channel recently. The 5000 is a larger case. This is kind of full tower case versus mid tower. Then the letter D or X refers to the material for the front panel. So this is glass, that's X. And then of course RGB refers to the fact that you get RGB fans in the case. You may also get RGB strips in some cases, but typically Corsair goes with fans. Now, you also have the word iCUE in a lot of the product names. I think that's a little bit redundant, but iCUE is the software suite that's used to control these cases. And of course, if you have RGB in the case, you're going to use the iCUE software to control it. That's why it's a little bit duplicative to say iCUE RGB. But anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way. I love the look of this case. I think it's absolutely a successor to the Obsidian line. I think you'll probably agree if you're familiar with that lineup. And without further ado, let me jump into the features of this case. Front and center, you'll see a glass panel on this case to allow the RGB lighting to shine through. The glass panel is held on by 4 pop rivets, which makes it extremely easy to remove, so you can gain access to the filter and the fans. Speaking of the fans, these are brand new SP Elite RGB fans from Corsair, never released at retail. Hopefully they will be released because they are a ground-up redesign. They max out at just 1450 RPM and perform quite well, which is a change for Corsair fans. Note that the rails here don't offer a lot of adjustability up or down, including for 140mm fans, but the good news is the rails don't get in the way when you are mounting 120mm fans, as shown here. Up top, you have another glass panel with a 1 1/4 inch gap between it and the vents for great airflow, plus 2 USB 3.0s, a Type-C, and a TRS jack. On the right side of the case, we have another tempered glass panel, this one with a large vent cutout that allows you to use either fans or a radiator. Taking a look inside the chassis, we see a lot of space for coolers, including a 360 or 280mm radiator up top, as well as in the front. And removing that interior panel allows you access to the side vent for another 240 or 360. Flipping over to the other side, you can see the mount for the radiator. Take note that to remove the panel, you do have to remove a number of screws. Now, this swing out panel covers your cable clutter and gives you access to the lighting node core here for 6 channels of RGB plus 6 PWM fans on the fan controller that connects to your motherboard's PWM header. There are 3 built-in SSD trays plus a completely useless hard drive cage, which could fit 2 hard drives, but would prevent you from actually fitting any power supplies in your system because there's no room for cables. It doesn't actually fit, and I had to remove that drive tray from the case to actually build the system. I commented on this to Corsair and said that this was basically a throwaway, and they more or less agreed. The case features Corsair's new Rapid Route cable management system, which is quite effective, although that internal radiator tray did get in the way. Note that both the PWM fan controller and the lighting node core need their own SATA power connection, and oddly, while the fan controls must use motherboard software, the RGB controls must use Corsair's iCUE software via a USB connection. Once your system's cabled up, you can swing this panel closed to cover up those cables, and then you can put that glass panel on and you'll see nothing through it, which is actually pretty neat. although it does beg the question, what is the point of a glass panel on this side anyway? Turning to the main compartment, it looks really neat in here thanks to the generous amount of space for GPUs, frankly, of any size, plus coolers up to 170 millimeters tall and dual 360 millimeter raters. The one issue I had here was with this panel that covers the grommets. It made it really hard to route these cables. These are the individually sleeved cables from Corsair. They're typically really easy to use and very flexible, but I would remove this panel before doing any cabling in this system. Take note that Corsair has developed a brand new way of mounting the glass side panel. You have to fit these tabs into the front and then use pop rivets in the back, plus the captive screws, which definitely holds the glass in place, but makes it a lot more difficult to remove this without dropping it on the table. Here's what the system looks like up and running. I think it really channels the old Obsidian line. It's a great successor to those cases, and I actually like the glass more than the aluminum panels those cases used. Now for my noise testing, I positioned my noise meter 2 feet from the case diagonally and above, and here it is registering 37 decibels with the 3 fans running at maximum RPM. And here it is running at my decibel normalized level of 35 decibels. Moving on to the benchmarks, I start with idle at the desktop, and the sole purpose for showing you this graph is to show you what the minimum RPM of the fans is. Here, those Corsair fans are spinning down to 181 RPM, which gives you a lot of flexibility to tune your system at idle, and I'd actually suggest most people spin these fans quite a bit faster, maybe 400 or 500 RPM, so that your GPU and CPU fans don't have to work as hard. And in particular, if you have a 0 fan mode on your GPU, definitely turn those case fans up, because that will prevent your GPU fans from switching on and off, which is actually quite a bit more noticeable than just having any fan at a constant RPM. Moving on to the load test, I start with Cinebench R20 in a 5-minute loop, and here things go awry quite quickly for the 5000X. I actually have 2 results here, first at maximum RPM, and then at a 35 decibel normalized level to match the other 2 cases I have in this roundup, the Be Quiet 500DX and the Be Quiet 802 with mesh panels installed. Now take note here, of course, that the Corsair 5000X has a deficiency in terms of fan size. It has 3 120s instead of the 3 140s of the 2 Be Quiet cases, but there's more going on here than meets the eye, and I will dig a little bit deeper as we get further into the benchmarks. Of course, it goes without saying that these results are not very good. 88 degrees in Cinebench is, simply put, not acceptable, and the VRM temps are quite high as well. And take note that the temperatures are about the same at maximum RPM as they are at 1326 or a 35 decibel normalized level. And like a lot of fans, these fans really kind of get ragged near the maximum, and you definitely want to back off that maximum. So even though they're rated at just 1440, don't think that that is a good speed to run them at. Consider that a high speed for these fans. They actually are pretty good fans, but you don't want to use any fan at maximum RPM. Not surprisingly, when we add another heat source to the case in the form of the RTX 3080 in 3D Mark Time Spy, things go from bad to worse. Here we have the CPU temp at 76 degrees regardless of the fan RPM, and the GPU at 89 degrees, again regardless of the RPM of those fans. And as you can imagine, I was fairly disappointed in these results, quite a bit hotter than the 2 Be Quiet cases. But as we know, the 2 Be Quiet cases do have mesh panels, both the 500DX out of the box and then the 802 with the mesh panels included in the box. So here I have to say, look, those 2 cases have an advantage, and that got me thinking, well, how could I make this Corsair 5000X a whole lot better? Let's take a look. The first thing I did was pull the front panel off my Corsair 4000D Airflow, which was nearly a perfect fit, just a little bit short, but it does give us a good approximation of what an airflow design would allow. And then I tried moving the fans. Anyone who's seen my past videos on fan optimization knows that there are bad ways to mount your fans and there are good ways to mount your fans. And the absolute worst way to use 3 fans is to use 3 fans in the front of your case. So I did Corsair a favor here, removing the top front fan, which was blowing a whole lot of air into empty space, and moving it to the rear as an exhaust, where, as you will see, it does a whole lot more good. So let's take another look at Cinebench R20, where we can see the stock Corsair 5000X performing about as well as a brick oven. And then all I need to do is give it either an airflow front panel or move that front fan to the rear, and I get fantastic results, 83 or 84 degrees. And then combining these two tweaks, I get 82 degrees on the CPU at just 37.5 decibels. Now that does put it a little bit louder than the Silent Bass 802 with mesh panels, but the results are just as good in terms of thermals. Things are even better in 3D Mark TimeSpy, where these simple tweaks, one of which you can do right out of the box, dramatically improve both CPU and GPU temps, dropping them from 76 and 89 respectively down to 70 and 83. That's going from terrible to totally acceptable. And the best part is there's barely any noise penalty going with the airflow front panel or moving that front fan to the rear. And let me make clear, I have communicated this to Corsair. I have told them they would be crazy if they didn't release an updated RGB model with one fan in the rear. It can be RGB or not RGB, but please put a fan back there to stop cooking these components. And second of all, use an airflow front panel. They only offer these with their non-RGB cases, and that's just nonsensical. The airflow front panels look great. They allow the RGB to shine through, and they don't suffocate your components. Talk about a win-win. Well, it goes without saying that I think there are some good things and bad things about this case. Out of the box, the performance just isn't there. It's not the first case that I've tested where I've found out of the box performance pales in comparison to what you can actually do for free by just adjusting some fans, but this one was really bad. So there are a couple of things I would suggest you do absolutely out of the box. First of all, if you don't want to spend a dime over what you pay for this case, just move one of the front fans to the rear to get more exhaust. Keeping in mind, you don't have a lot of mounting options in the front, so you can't space those out. You're going to be kind of fixed with kind of two fans in the lower positions, but your performance will be so much better. You can also just add any 120 millimeter fan to the back of this to improve performance. It really doesn't matter what brand it is, just get some exhaust flow out of the case. There are a couple other options as well. You could go with the airflow model of this case, which sells for $165, has the airflow front panel and airflow top, and it of course doesn't have glass on the top or on the side, but you do get that airflow front that is so valuable in my opinion. It has two fans. You can move the front fan to the top where it'll do a lot of good, and then use your choice of 3 ARGB fans in the front. I would actually recommend the new Arctic P120 Bionics fans. I'll link that in the description. They were just launched and they offer great performance and great looks. You could also go with Corsair's 3-packs. Those are typically a little bit more expensive because they include a hardware controller, which the airflow model of this case doesn't have. Now, another thing you should know about is Corsair is planning to sell the airflow front panel on its own from its web shop online at Corsair.com. So look for that. If you end up picking up this case and want to get the airflow through the front, you can go ahead and do that from Corsair directly. Now, in terms of the competition, look, I think this case is a little bit more expensive than some of its competitors. You do get the hardware RGB controller that links up with iCUE. So if you've bought into the iCUE system, you know that's worth it to you. For everyone else, you have to think about the competitors from Lian Li, from Fantex, from Cooler Master. I personally use an H500P mesh from Cooler Master, which now sells for around 160 bucks. So, you know, with Corsair, you're getting a few other things. You get great customer service, honestly, better than any of those other brands. You get that hardware controller. You have the look. So if you like the look of this, and I think it looks really good, hey, it's worth paying for. But if you just want a little bit of glass and some ARGB and a mesh front panel at a lower price, you can get that from other manufacturers a little bit more easily than you can get it from Corsair. I do hope that Corsair will release a version of this case that blends the best features of both the airflow and the RGB models. So an airflow front panel out of the box would be great, and ideally one fan in the rear to supplement the 3 RGB fans in the front. I don't think that should raise the price that much, particularly if the front panel in steel is cheaper than the glass panel they use on this model. So I have implored Corsair to release a case like this. They have the parts. It's already in the parts bin, right? They just have to mix and match a little bit differently. I think they'd have the perfect case at the $200 price point. Now, if you have any questions about this review, definitely post them down below. If you enjoyed the review, absolutely give me that like and subscribe. That helps me, gives me the incentive to produce more videos like this in the future. And until next time, I'm Ari from the Tech Buyers Guru.